Welcome to the Zest podcast, the podcast that flips the script on traditional coaching. Here, we challenge the status quo by turning coaching relationships on their heads. Instead of the usual dynamic where coaches lead the way, we give the coachee the mic. Each episode, a coachee interviews their coach, diving into topics they're both passionate about, be it leadership, personal growth, or navigating challenges such as neurodiversity in the workplace. Our unique format inspires authentic conversations, shared learning, and fresh perspectives. We are showcasing the dynamic chemistry that comes from real-world coaching relationships. The mission is to disrupt power dynamics, spark curiosity, and offer you inspiring, zesty insights into work, life, and everything in between. So join us as we explore bold ideas, unfiltered stories, and the transformative power of coaching, zesty style.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sumaia Michelle and today I'm joined by Dr Anna Kane, who founded Zest Psychology. She's also a chartered coach and an occupational psychologist. So Zest Psychology is the home of authentic confidence and offers coaching, facilitation, personal, team and organizational development. So a whole package. We're going to use today to uncover some valuable insights on the intersection of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD for short, and entrepreneurship. I'm really excited today to be interviewing Dr. Kane. I actually first met Anna about a year ago. I was looking for some career coaching and we just connected straight away. And I actually quite remember that when I first spoke to you, Anna, you really suggested that I speak to a few coaches, at least 4 or 5, before I make my decision to come back to you. But I just knew at that point really quickly that I had a lot to learn from you. And I'm really hoping that our listeners today are also going to learn this. So imagine my surprise when not only did I hit it off with Anna, but also I hear that Anna has ADHD. She's not only completed a PhD, but also runs her own business and is an incredible researcher and leader in her field. And I find that the reason why I'm so pleasantly surprised by this is because I find it very rare to encounter someone who is in a leadership position, openly discusses ADHD, especially because of all the stereotypical expectations of how a leader should be or how they should sort of present themselves. So I'm going to start by acknowledging the extraordinary accomplishment of being able to run your business, assume a leadership role, conduct research, all whilst you're navigating the challenges that come with having ADHD. So successfully juggling these responsibility demands not just motivation and meticulous organization, but also I think it really requires you to have the resilience to weather criticism. So then when you add ADHD into the equation, it really does introduce a unique set of challenges that need a distinctive blend of resilience and ingenuity. So the symptoms associated with ADHD, such as spontaneous behaviour, difficulty sustaining attention or meeting deadlines, can be quite perceived as contrary to the controversial expectations of leadership, business management, and pursuing a PhD. And that's why I think it's so important for us to dive into the experiences of someone who not only defies these stereotypes, but thrives in a leadership role. And I know so many people out there will be asking the same questions I will today. So I'm really excited to hear from you, Anna, Dr. Kane, about your experience, both the challenges and your valuable insights, how you've navigated motivation, organization, handling of criticisms over the years. So I'm just going to jump in with my first question. So I think firstly, what I really am curious about is what spurred you to found Zest Psychology?
Well, before I get on to answering your question, just to say how brilliant it is to be here with you having this conversation. It's exciting to hear your introduction and have someone else kind of set the scene in terms of your own work and experiences and so on, because it's so easy just to be in it and just getting on with it. So to hear you, Sumaia, kind of describe my experiences there's something quite refreshing about hearing it from someone else. So thank you for that, and for wanting to have this conversation where we get to unpack some of these issues. So yeah, it's really great to be here, chatting to you, based on that first getting to know each other over a coaching session. So your first question about what spurred me to found Zest Psychology. So it happened during lockdown. I was in a partnership with another occupational psychologist who I've known for years and I'm still very good friends with and I still work with. But so it was 2020, it was like the first bit of lockdown in March in the UK, when I'd just moved into a new flat, and so I'd got my own space, and I was actually feeling a little bit burnt out from working really hard for a long time, and I'd finished my professional doctorate in 2018. I graduated in 2019. My dad had died at the end of 2018, so I'd had a lot going on. He was ill for most of, well, he was diagnosed with cancer in February 2018. So 2018 was an epic year for me, in terms of huge life events happening, in terms of my dad dying, completing my professional doctorate, and so by the time lockdown happened in 2020, I was really ready for that space to just decompress a bit and process everything that had happened. And I did a lot of meditation and connecting with my friends that meditate, and my girlfriend at the time. And the space that allowed me gave me the time to realize that I wasn't making the most out of my professional doctorate. So the work on my professional doctorate was I developed the embodied dynamic and inclusive model of self-confidence, and that kind of how I reference that is my work on authentic confidence. And I basically realized that I needed and wanted to spend more time developing my work in line with that, with my research findings and output. So I chatted to my business partner and we agreed a different way of working, and I set up Zest Psychology. She maintained Work Psychology Hub, and so Zest was born. So that's, yeah, it was odd because it was a really important time in my life, and even though the world was crazy, wasn't it? It was unprecedented. We all know that. It was actually quite nourishing and growthful for me, and because I was tucked away in my little flat, and all of my clients went quiet because of working on a lot of my clients are government organisations, so they're all diverted to work on COVID, or they were left with skeleton teams, so there was no time for coaching or any kind of personal development programs or anything like that. So yes, there was a real kind of contradiction in terms of the world being really challenging and difficult, and yet I found kind of a nourishing space to grow.
It's really interesting to hear you sort of speak about that, because there were, like you said, challenges externally. The entire world sort of stopped, and then you had your personal situation with your dad passing away, and I'm really sorry to hear about that. And so you had all this going on, and normally people would say this is probably the least suitable time to be thinking innovation or starting something new, but you went completely against the norm, and it's actually very refreshing and inspirational to hear that. I'm just very curious to know, did ADHD factor into any of your thoughts or decision-making process?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think every answer I'm going to give you is going to be a contradiction. Um, uh, so no, it didn't, because I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD at the time. So I was only actually diagnosed with ADHD last year, um, which I don't know if I shared with that with you before. Um, so it wasn't a factor in that explicit known way, but at the same time, I would say it probably, it doesn't change the fact that whether you're diagnosed or not, it doesn't change who you are. It makes you potentially more aware of, oh, okay, that's why I'm like this, and that's why I'm like that. But so I guess that kind of that that ability to, if I'm given some space to spot opportunities and to look for for ways to improve, ways to do things, that for me, that's the part of being ADHD, is that I'm always looking for opportunities and thinking creatively, and a bit of space really helps that. So that's why lockdown and ADHD combination worked for me. So yes, it did, but I just wasn't aware at the time that well, maybe I had some awareness, but I hadn't really turned towards it all. So yeah, I think
Of how ADHD can be an advantage, because you're not sort of thinking about it, you're just thinking, I want something interesting, I want something exciting. And what really holds people back usually is the realistic person, all the things that could go wrong. And so focused on that, they don't even focus on, how thrilling it would be or how interesting it would be. And so yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's that kind of buzz, isn't it, of like seeking something different and taking a bit of a risk and going for something, and not worrying, oh, yeah, actually, I'm going to leave behind a successful business that there's nothing wrong with it, and yet I'm going to start up something new that hasn't got any. I mean, obviously it did have foundations, but the business itself was brand new, and yet for me, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is like, okay, what could happen today?
The excitement.
Yeah,
It's interesting because a lot of people, when you ask them, those who are looking for a new role, it's that when they wake up in the morning, they're not excited and thrilled about what could the day bring. Um,
yeah,
you're in a very privileged situation to feel like that every morning. And
yeah,
I remember when we were chatting, I asked you, and I remember this very clearly. I said, how on earth do you keep up with all the admin work that comes with running a business? Obviously, in this era, you're always taught identify your weaknesses and work on improving them. But sometimes in certain instances, for example, if you've got a neurodivergent brain, you just need to accept and embrace your weakness, and that you're never going to be the best person at it, and actually just find a way of working around them. So you mentioned others that work at Zest Psychology. Can you tell us about how you surround yourself by people who support the parts of your work and life that you may feel you're not the best at?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure I've managed to necessarily fill the gaps that I'm not best at, because what ends up happening is I love working with other people who are neurodivergent, and so I would say that there are still gaps in the business that we don't fill between us, but that's okay, that's fine. Um, uh, but essentially, like, so for me, one of the things about and like I just have to caveat some of this conversation, because I've listened to other people talking about ADHD, and I do have a bit of a bugbear of kind of bringing every single personality trait back to being ADHD, because it ends up becoming a kind of ADHD wash of personality. And so I want to kind of avoid that. But things like the risk seeking that we've just spoken about, that is definitely an ADHD trait. And the trait of being able to like see lots of different things going on and join the dots, and have a mind that loves connecting those dots, or in my case often people, is I think an ADHD trait, and having lots of energy to invest in that. So I'm extrovert by nature. I've developed my introvert side, but I'm essentially extrovert. I love being around people. I don't like small talk, so I like being around people who like to kind of have meaningful conversations. And so people who work at Zest or with Zest tend to fit the bill in terms of um, having values that align with the Zest values, and who have different skill sets to me, um, but we're all kind of pulling in the same direction, which I guess is just what a business is, isn't it? It's a team of people that have different skill sets that are pulling in the same direction. In terms of organisation, everybody brings their own way of getting organised to the party, and for me, the ADHD way is knowing how badly organised I am means that I've put lots of processes in place, whether that be other people who have a different way of getting organised, or my own processes, which are like, well, I'll have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. So I'm always got backup plans, and and often those backup plans come in the form of other people remembering stuff, or like being more having more responsibility for delivering different parts of the work that we do. Um, uh, Sorry, I've just got distracted by a big truck that's driving past the window. This is part of my daily life. I work, well, our offices are on a one-way system, and there's loads of traffic that distracts me on a daily basis. So where have we got to? So about being organized. Yeah, like sometimes I just, have to, like sometimes it just comes down to the simple things, like with my coaching notes, for example. I used to find myself getting in this panic before a coaching session, looking for an individual's notes, and feeling really stressed out, because I'd be like sifting through a pile of notes. And then one day I was like, it's really simple. You just get file dividers and put people's notes in according to their first name. And from then, since then I rarely lose notes, because I just force myself to use that system, and and it sticks. Some systems stick and others don't. Others I get bored of, or I forget that I've put a system in place. Um, but definitely working with other people gives me like energy to keep going on these things, and different people have different inspiration about how to do stuff. So that means that together we kind of just get along and get things organized, and but at the same time we're kind of understanding towards each other. Like, I was meeting up with with someone this morning from the team, and she messaged me and she was like, "Are we still meeting?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I put you in the diary for tomorrow." So, and she was just, she was fine about it. And I explained what had happened. She's like, "Don't worry, that's why I got in touch." So we're kind of open and honest with each other about the fact that we might not remember stuff, even though it is important to us. The conversation I had with her was really, really important and really, really useful. But the fact that I put it in the diary for the wrong day just meant that I didn't turn up for it on time. So I think being really open with each other is such a critical bit, isn't it? About then people can go, "Oh yeah, that's just how it rolls," rather than taking things personally or reading something into it that's not there.
And it's really interesting hearing all of those parts that you've covered, because it's actually what drew me to your personality. It was, I felt you were just so more honest about what you weren't so good at, or what, "I'm not perfect at this, I could or couldn't." And we're so used to almost marketing ourselves, or the image management of how perfect you are, and we see that on social media, and the way you've got to, when you apply for jobs, you show the best of the best, but bringing that down to realism and actually telling me, yes, part of it is ADHD, but just part of it is just being human and being different.
Yeah.
I find, for me, it's really, really refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
We all need to be a bit more honest with people around us to tell them what we're not good at, so that, I'm sure if you hadn't been honest with her, she wouldn't have checked in and might have turned up, waited for about an hour, and then all sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that being human is just part of life, isn't it? Because of the pain it causes when we don't really allow ourselves to be in our vulnerabilities and to be like real about who we are. It just causes people more anguish and more pain, I think, to be constantly trying to be this like amazing person to whoever. And I don't know, like, in my experiences of the work that I do with people, I've found that, like, so if I'm thinking about a leadership program that I did, and a lot of that program was about um, encouraging people to have conversations with each other about their own stuff and other people's stuff, so that they could lead in this kind of authentically confident way. And so often when someone turns up and shares something in front of their peers, like, "I'm finding this difficult," or, "I'm struggling with this," then nearly always what I hear coming back from their peers is, "Oh my goodness, I find that really encouraging to hear that I'm not the only one who's struggling with that thing," or that, this thing going on in the business is also causing having an impact on you." And so, like, by people sharing those whatever vulnerabilities, difficulties, normally that makes other people feel better rather than worse, because it's like this realization that you're not the only one struggling. And that really just stems from compassion, because that's what compassion's about. It's about realizing that we're all in this human mess together.
And maybe it's a bit of a divergence here, but I think personally it's really important for me to bring up COVID again, because that was the time that we, as people who worked and then ended up working from home, really saw the human side of the people we work with. So if you have your very, very senior bosses, and suddenly a child comes crying across the screen, or and
Yeah.
see that they're trying to juggle homeschooling and chair a meeting with 150 people and make a decision while they're doing it about something else. That's and I feel like that sort of created more of a leveling field for people who were able to almost either not show their vulnerabilities at all, mask it completely, and have two separate lives, versus people who had slightly different way of home work life. So they found it harder pre-COVID to mask the vulnerability, and it kind of created that leveling field, if that makes sense. That's personally how I sort of felt.
Yeah. What you mean? It kind of like for the workers who worked from home, because obviously some workers didn't have this experience, did they? But for kind of office workers, if you like, you're suddenly people are suddenly put in a position where they have to be more vulnerable, or others are starting to find out about, yeah, I've got kids that are around, and the struggles I have with them. It starts to level people out that way. Yeah.
And it leveled males and females as well. So, where sometimes traditionally, I'm not going to say it's across the board because it's definitely not across the board, but if sometimes you felt men didn't have to look after his children as much, but then during COVID, you saw that actually they also had to get involved, and that supported women a bit more. But I'm diverging here.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, it's interesting because in terms of like the work I do around confidence, I saw how that did make some changes for people. So, for example, um, like people sitting in meetings round a table, you get to hear the same voices all the time, and and for some people they were like, I just find it really difficult trying to find a point at which I can intervene. And then suddenly you move it to online, then there's processes that support people. So you can raise your virtual hand, and unless it's really badly chaired, then the chair goes to whoever's raised their virtual hand. So so some of that semi-structure that's put in place by people working from home does support a whole range of people. So, coming back to the kind of neurodivergent theme, for people who've struggled to know, okay, at what point can I interject? Which, when am I being rude and when am I not being rude, and so on. Then it removes some of that uncertainty, and that semi-structure gives people some safety by which they can operate. But then there's also some downsides to it as well. Like not everyone had a home office, or you heard about people working from their twins' bunk beds and stuff like that. But yes, we do diverge a little bit. But it's interesting to see how different processes and practices can support different people who have always tried to be fitting the kind of norm that was created by the dominant group, which is, historically white, middle class, cisgender, straight men. And the workplace is not shouldn't be dominated by that group anymore, because the world's moved on.
The ADHD again. Interesting to hear from you. Has where, and I'm sure it has more than once, where has ADHD proven to be a strength in any part of your journey?
So again, coming back to the kind of contradictions or the juxtaposition of things, like my experiences as someone who's ADHD. So for example, the seeking of novel and exciting experiences, I would say, is a part of being ADHD. And that's kind of driven my career, in that whilst I've been an occupational psychologist for 20 odd years, and there have been kind of prolonged themes within my career. Like I spent a long spell doing assessment work within government and other organisations, and now I've spent a prolonged time doing coaching work. But trying to push the boundaries and do things differently and learn and grow, and like, so pushed me to do my professional doctorate and to set up Zest and to work with a diverse range of people. And like Zest, this morning I was having a conversation with Mariam, and we were talking about how Zest constantly is evolving and changing and growing, and that's partly the tone I set for the organisation. But the people who are attracted to come and work with Zest tend to enjoy that, but not always. And but people come and go, and so that all of those things can be strengths, but they can also be like pitfalls as well, because sometimes I think that people are, some people who are successful will decide on something that they want to do, they'll do it and they'll stick with it, and they're quite happy staying in one lane and progressing like within that lane and developing their career. And I just can't sit still for long enough to do that, which means that I don't always get to build on like the hard work that I put in, because I'll ditch stuff if I think, I'm bored of that, or I can see a better way of doing it. But then at the same time, I like working in the way I like working. So I'm more about the experience than maybe the credibility or the status, or the money, or all the other things that maybe drive other people in their career and their work. So yeah. Don't know if
Something what I'm hearing is you being yourself again, your humble self. ADHD has been a strength because you've been thinking outside the box. You are very innovative, and yes, Zest is evolving and changing, but that's because the way in which entrepreneurship at the moment is evolving and changing, and the way you're providing career coaching, and you're providing workshops and all sorts of services for people. You can't just think one way. You have to see what's going on out there. What do people need? What do organizations need? And then evolve. So the ADHD trait of always seeking something different is actually exactly why someone like yourself should be in the industry that you're in. We don't want people who stick to an idea and develop a 5-year strategy and a roadmap and then stick to it, because that's not going to serve the people that you're trying to serve. It could serve you for the first few months, or it could serve you for 2 years, but it's unlikely to serve you for the entire period of time.
Yeah, because you're not doing that stopping and reading what's going on around you. But that said, Sumaia, the opposite thing that people with ADHD do is they get hyper focused, as you'll know, and sometimes I'll get that hyper focus. So when I developed the Authentic Confidence Hub, I can't really remember where I got, like, the idea just evolved. And one day during lockdown, I was like, right, I'm going to develop a load of content. And then suddenly, before I knew it, I developed a whole load of modules, and I'd spent days and nights working on it. And I found some coaching clients that I'd worked with in the past who had some time available because of lockdown, and so we like piloted it together. So they got some free development out of it, and I got some great feedback. And no client had really particularly asked for it directly. And then one day, not too far after that, a client turned up and was saying, this is what we want to be working on. And that project evolved and grew. And then it got to the point where I was like, oh, well, in terms of what you're trying to do now, I've got this platform full of learning content that will really help with what you're trying to do, and then suddenly another 2 years emerged from that particular project because I happened to have this platform sitting around that I'd been working on because I'd got into a hyper focus about, yeah, I'm going to develop some content, and so things can, that might not have that might not have led anywhere, and I might have spent ages hyper focusing on something that didn't manifest into something a client wanted. Fortunately, it did, but there's other things that I'll hyper focus on that just will go by the wayside because
So you're
the
saying
timing
what
wasn't
could be a
right or
strength,
whatever.
yeah, what was a strength at that time may not have worked out another time, or
Yeah,
if you were able to hyper focus, you might not have been able to achieve the end result that you did. Um, yeah, it's very tricky. Very tricky. Uh, I anyone with ADHD are familiar with the need to seek dopamine, and I think that's what you've been trying to bring across in our discussion so far. That you're always sort of looking at something that's interesting and thrilling because ultimately that's what's going to get you the dopamine.
yeah,
And that's very positive, and comes as an advantage because in pressurized environments, because you'll be thriving, you'll be able to take quick decisions when the need is required. But there is another part which is less discussed, and that's about the handling of criticism. So ADHD comes with some sensitivity. So even sometimes when feedback is meant to be constructive and to support you with your learning or you're developing in a work environment, it can be just that little bit more difficult for a sensitive person. And how have you encountered this? And if you have encountered it, how have you tried to handle it?
yeah. So I am very sensitive. I do have rejection sensitivity. Is it disorder? Yeah, the D on it, RSD. I am sensitive to rejection, um, which may surprise some people because I can be um, quite bold and out there in some moments, but I do get sensitive to rejection, and obviously constructive or negative. Sometimes feedback is just negative; it's not constructive. Um, and especially if you work in big groups with big groups, people have the anonymity to just be outright rude and unpleasant about what you're delivering, which is hard. That's hard to handle. But I think most people find that hard to handle, but it does vary. Some people will just be like, oh well, let's move on and not take it too personally. I I but on the other hand, I love feedback, and I'd rather have feedback. It's a bit like being a naughty child, like naughty children that want attention will be naughty if that's their way of getting attention, and they'd rather get told off than ignored. So I'd rather have feedback that's negative or constructive than no feedback. I don't like a feedback void. And I know from my work that other people can operate in a feedback void and they're perfectly fine with that. Um, but people who are neurodivergent tend to like feedback. I think partly because we're not all, that sometimes there's some stuff we're not equipped to read particularly well. If you're on the autism spectrum, then it can be difficult to read situations and people and so on. And then with ADHD, either you miss stuff because you're thinking about something else, or you've just, like, your energy levels are so kind of chaotic that it can be difficult to sense into what's going on. But then that sensitivity means you can also oversense into what's going on. So I feel like I'm getting in a little tangle here about it all. But essentially, in answer to your question, yes, I have experienced that, and I do have practices around feedback. So if I'm looking at feedback where I sense that there's going to be some challenging feedback in there, then I need to prepare myself to be in the right place for it. And then I need to support myself in terms of how I handle it. So I have at the moment, I've only got one supervisor, but I often have 2 or 3 supervisors to talk stuff through with, or like a coach and a supervisor. So I find that support really useful, and I have peer support where I have places to talk stuff through. Because like if feedback is about what you've delivered and it feels personal, then it can lead to feelings of shame. And we know that shame, if you keep it in a dark corner, it actually just grows and festers and grabs hold of you. And the best way to deal with any feelings of shame are to talk it through with someone, release it, open the doors and the windows and aerate it, and get it moving. And actually then that from there you can learn and grow from it, and go, okay, so what can I take from this that's useful, and what can I let go of? Because just because someone has an opinion, it doesn't mean that it's correct or true, or that you have to observe it or change automatically in response to it. But people with ADHD tend to be people pleasers, so often they can find themselves buffeting around, can't they? And like, you said that, so I'm going to do that, and then you said that, so I'm going to do that. So it's important for me, my mindfulness practice and my self-compassion practice helps me remain as grounded as is possible, so that I don't just automatically respond, or react rather. I don't just automatically react to stuff coming in, and I allow myself a moment to pause and process and choose how to respond. So yeah, quite a lot there, but it's the practices that I have that help me deal with those things.
So I think what I'm hearing is, if kind of advice you might give to the listeners are, one, if you know you may be getting negative or constructive feedback, find a way, prepare yourself mentally, physically, to be able to receive it. Secondly, is ensure that you have a support, or almost like a toolkit or a package, that once you've received it, how are you going to manage it? Whether that's how you're going to accept or reject some of what's been said, and then how are you going to use your support network to help you manage that. That's the second point. And then maybe the third point is, you might have a feedback void and you might not like it, but actually the best way to maybe think about it is, no feedback is good feedback. And once you have those 3 sets, that's going to support you in managing and handling. And then that's not just for people with ADHD or who are neurodivergent. That's anybody who's sensitive and is working, or a bit unsure of themselves, and as they climb up the career ladder as well. Would you agree to that? Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Agree with it. I'd say there's 2 extra things. One, to your kind of summary of it, is that there's a general underpinning practice of mindfulness and compassion that help support all of those 3 things that you just highlighted. And then also I would say that I think that advice is good for anybody, regardless of whether they're sensitive to feedback or insensitive to feedback, because some people don't like feedback. They like to create their own hubristic or overconfident bubble where they don't want any feedback coming in, and they'll block it. So because they like to keep their ego inflated, so they're quite happy walking around thinking, I'm wonderful. So there's lots of different experiences, I guess, and I just I think feedback's really important for anyone.
Agree to all of that. So we've got 5 things there that listeners can take away. Whether you're sensitive or non-sensitive, it's just all about managing feedback.
Yeah.
Have there been any particular experiences that you've encountered that were almost like a light bulb moment in terms of managing neurodiversity with the work that you do? And that could be through your work with clients, organizations, something. It's not, maybe doesn't have to be personal to you, it could be what you've seen around, or the way you've been an entrepreneur.
So light bulb moments. Sometimes I feel like I get quite a lot of light bulb moments, and it like
Are they flickering all the time, on and off, constantly?
like I'll be like, oh my God, this is it. And sometimes I have to be careful not to just get carried away with like, I've had this amazing insight into something I'm doing or something someone else is doing. But also, like when I do get light bulb moments, being ADHD means you typically have a poor working memory. That is a feature. And so you can have a great insight and then it can be gone as well, which is fine, because it means you're free to have that insight again and go, oh yes, yeah. So it's hard for me to identify specific light bulb moments, but I do get them because I am a reflector, and I do like, as a psychologist, you're always looking for light bulb moments in your own work or for other people to have light bulb moments. It's if you talk to any psychologist, they'll often say that, or any kind of psychologist coach, at least, they'll typically say they love those light bulb moments with clients. But I think just coming back to that mindfulness and self-compassion practice, I think for me, like when I first realized how distracted I can get, that was really, it wasn't really a light bulb moment, because it was a shocking moment to notice. When I started practicing mindfulness, I started observing myself, and I was shocked to see just how distracted I could get. And so mindfulness is like the opposite of a light bulb moment in many ways. It's a slow burner, but the realization that if I discipline my mind and observe my mind and practice coming back to the present moment, then actually that's got so many benefits for me in so many ways, that's not just my mind, but my emotions and my physical experiences, that all of those are equally important. And then combine those with exercise, like so the mindfulness compassion practices combined with exercise, then that just really allows me to still retain my true authentic self, but just in a way that's a bit more manageable for me and for other people, hopefully too. So yeah, but I studied mindfulness and self-compassion at university for a couple of years, and it took quite a long time to really just let it settle in, like what an amazing impact it can have on, by disciplining yourself, you set yourself free. It's like a really curious paradox of freedom through discipline. So yeah,
Very interesting way to put it, because it's almost, when people talk about discipline, they feel it's the opposite of freedom, but
yeah,
you're telling me it's not.
no, well, the discipline provides freedom.
Exactly, but
Yeah,
don't know, when you associate discipline, you associate it with a lack of freedom, but actually when you
Yeah,
take discipline, it does set you free.
yeah, 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 exactly. If you think of discipline, you think of someone in the army who's
Mm.
running like lots of miles every day and cleaning their boots and doesn't get to make any decisions about anything. And that, maybe that's true. I've never joined the army, but in this context, yeah, it's about that freedom it gives you.
I have a last question. I might do something slightly differently. So my question
Yeah.
was actually about if you had any specific coping strategies to stay focused and organized, and which ones that you use to support you in managing your organization and your focus.
Mm.
Rather than ask you the question, let me tell you what I think you've told me about that, and tell me whether
Okay.
you think there's anything that you'd like to add to it, and if I've
Okay.
understood or misunderstood. So the
Yeah.
first one I think is about you building a structure around you to buffer or safeguard what you think you're not the best at. So if you're not the best at a type of the organization of your files or organization of responding to people, you build a system around you. And it's not just one system, it's foolproof multiple systems to safeguard you, because you know that it's not just a small weakness, it's something that you just cannot get better at. So I feel like that might be one of the things that you've mentioned. The second one is about trying to work out what's best for you, not to always associate with things you may not be the best at because of ADHD. It's just could just be you as a human being. And then once you recognize that, you work out what is the best way, and it's a balance that might be for you or it might just be for your organization. It doesn't mean that you just have to replicate or duplicate what others. And then the third one is about being open and honest with others about the way you work and the way, here are my strengths, here are what I'm not so good at, this is how you can help me, so both of us can appreciate it. And the fourth one, and I know we normally do it in threes, but I have a fourth one.
Yeah, three's the magic number normally.
Three is the magic number, but the fourth one I think is the most important, and it's about
Yeah.
finding ways to be mindful. And so you talk about meditation, different people could do it in different ways. It could be
Yeah.
meditation in different forms, it could be prayer, it could just however people want to
Yeah.
do it, but the important thing is to find time to be mindful. would you
Yeah.
would there be anything you want to add to that or disagree with that?
So there's definitely nothing I'll disagree with. I think you've done an amazing job of summarising. And I guess I think just adding on to that mindful bit, or like you say, it may be prayer, it may be whatever the individual, wherever they get their kind of their connection from, and their sense of self, is it's about connecting in with who you are, which links back to your earlier point about doing it your way, but it's about looking after yourself. So that brings in the discipline bit, but the looking after yourself. So I know that if I look after myself, I've got the energy to be me. It's an energy intensive business being me, and if I don't have the energy and the resource, then that's difficult for me. So if I don't look after myself, then things can start to untangle a bit, or I don't know, I can't quite place my brain on the words, but
I think what you're
it's
trying to say, and it's something that maybe I use all the time, and it's maybe cheesy, I don't know where it's come from, but it's about trying to be a tree, not a candle, because when you're a candle, you're lighting everything around you and everyone around you, but you're burning yourself out. Whereas when you're a tree, the more you nourish yourself, you grow bigger, and therefore you create more shade and you create more fruit for everyone around you, whilst you're also developing. Could that be something?
Yeah, no, that's really nice. And the roots, like for me, that analogy, you're creating roots, which means you can blow around in the wind, whereas a candle can get blown out in the wind, can't it? Whilst
Exactly.
you're busy burning yourself out.
I'm going to definitely use that last part now to add to my analogy when I have to wind. Yeah, agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Anna,
No, that's nice analogy.
it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I mean, if there's anything you want to leave with our listeners, are there any key messages or key lessons that you'd like to share with them as final remarks?
Not really, because one thing I don't like doing is doing conclusions and
Mm.
wrap-ups. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ball back in your court, Samir, and ask how you found doing that. What's been the final remarks from you, Laya, in terms of enjoying doing this podcast?
Well, firstly, and you know, I've pursued you for a long time to try and get time to speak to you because I feel that it would be such a shame for others not to learn from you the way I did. And that's really on a serious note. And if I would take away some lessons or learnings that I'd like people to take away from the conversation that we've had today is one is just really understand that who you are, if you are neurodivergent, is not simply a list of your traits associated with if you have this ADHD or any other neuro qualities. It could just be you as a person. And everyone, regardless of what their background is, have things they're good at and not so good at. And it's about finding ways that they work for you. Um, and when you find the ways that work for you, don't assume that just because they may be a fantastic strength for you and for certain people, they might not work for other people or ways of working. And that's not something negative. You cannot cater for everybody. You cannot cater you can't cater for everybody. But also, if you can't cater for a specific maybe population or a group, it's not something negative. It's just that's why we're all different. That's why we have different industries that we work in or live in.
Yeah.
Those are really my key messages. And I think I will come back to this because this is the main reason why I even wanted to do this is we talk about being our authentic selves all the time, but there's still the way of this, how you should manage your image. But I sincerely believe that if you do stick to your authentic self, you will be able to maintain it long term and you will be able to build your self-confidence because it really is who you are. And those who appreciate it, you will find them and you will find your niche and what you enjoy. And when things don't work out, that's absolutely fine. And remember, and because this podcast is about ADHD, and now I've just kind of gone all over and I haven't done the magic 3 numbers, but hey, it's okay. That's why it's a podcast today. There are great traits, innovation, being able to take risks that many other people won't take. That's unique, and that's definitely a strength that you should be proud of. Anna, I genuinely am so honoured that you've taken the time to speak to me. It really has been a real pleasure. Before we sort of end, I do want to, if it's okay with you, to direct our listeners and watchers to a couple of resources in case they kind of want some more information. And the first one is you have a regular blog. Zest has a regular blog. So you can go on zestpsychology.com and find that, and you will find lots of information and interesting blogs in different areas. And the second one is your social media pages. I know you have a page on Instagram, which is at Zest Psychology, and Zest Psychology also has a page on LinkedIn where you put up lots of different links and interesting articles. So I would really like our listeners and watchers to click on those links and have a read, and I'm sure it will stimulate a lot of interesting discussions that hopefully will lead to another podcast after this.
Brilliant. Oh, it's been so amazing chatting to you. I've just really enjoyed it, and I've found your insights really interesting to listen to. And so thank you so much for your time and for persevering with us getting to this first podcast. It's been brilliant, really brilliant.
Thank you very much, Anna.